Hi, everyone. This is Moses Siregar. It's 4:35 p.m. in Arizona here on March 17th, 2022. And I'm really happy to be able to speak to you guys. I know that you guys are largely the people who this video is mostly intended for, largely students of Jeff Green, but not entirely. There's people who do all kinds of stuff apparently in your group, which is cool. I've been an astrologer about 28 years. I've been practicing, readings now. I think it's about 29 years on the study. So I've actually hit the Saturn return, I think, on that. And I am promoting what I call holistic astrology, which is a few things, but it's in essence it's a fusion of the best of Western astrology, Vedic astrology, and combining my own very serious research into locational astrology or astrocartography, astrolocality. So I'm trying to create something that just really hasn't been created, but not to make something new exactly. It's actually kind of old. I find a lot of the things that I'm doing are just looking at a lot of the things that are very old that work very well and sort of putting them together. So in a week, I'll be lecturing here on an introduction to holistic locational astrology, which is probably more my real main expertise. But, astrology is the foundation of locational astrology. So holistic astrology, the whole shebang, the better you are at astrology, understanding any aspect of astrology, the better you can be at locational astrology, which is a particular aspect or application of astrology. So today is an introduction to holistic astrology. Obviously, it's just a lecture. I did recently teach a master class on holistic locational astrology. It's 22 classes, and the first 7 classes are an introduction to holistic astrology. So it's sort of about a 15-hour version of what we're doing here tonight. So we can't try to cover 15 hours worth of material, obviously. But it is an introduction, and I hope that you'll find it very interesting. And I even have some charts we can play with. Stephen Forrest gave me permission to work with his chart a little bit, and so we may actually, look at his chart a bit and kind of apply some of the things that I do. Let's say. So we don't have a huge crowd like live, but a lot of people watch these videos later apparently. But I'm happy to take questions if any of them come through. We can work with that. So holistic astrology has 6 principles, and they're 6 words. They're 6 very simple, very basic words. They're guidelines, they're pointers, and I thought I would actually do something under the heading of each of those 6 principles. So the 6 guidelines here, I don't have a particularly formal language for that at this point, are I'll just tell you, they are flexibility, they are curiosity, precision, passion, humility, and compassion. So these are the guiding principles of holistic astrology. My intention is to create an approach, an intellectual beginning to inquire into something, and that it can grow and evolve. That as we remain curious, as we remain flexible, as we remain passionate, that this could evolve, in a number of ways. So humility is the one I thought we might start with, given that, what we are doing is arguably one of the least humble things around, right? We're saying, hey, I can read the heavens for you. And maybe if you charge money, people can send you money for that. And you can tell them some pretty cosmic stuff, right? You might tell them some pretty serious things. And you step back and look at that. And what we do as astrologers, if you practice, it's an awfully big responsibility, just to even attempt it. And I think sometimes we forget how amazing and awesome the whole thing is. And so the humility is extremely important. If we don't have that when we work with people, we're prone to making all sorts of mistakes. So here's, what is astrology? How does this come to be? So I imagine human beings looking up at the sky. The Earth is like infinitesimally tiny compared to the universe that we're seeing, essentially, when we look up at the heavens, the stars. And so we are infinitesimally tiny, looking up at something that is vast and infinite, and our little brains can't begin to comprehend how vast all of that is. And here's what I think, essentially maybe is what has happened. And this isn't saying that I know the truth of anything particularly metaphysical. It's just that it's a kind of a model of how to look at things. I think human beings looked to the heavens at one point, and wondered if there was some order in that, almost like looking into a pool, like water, and seeing some kind of magical image or reflection. We're looking in the heavens and looking for meaning from the vastness of the universe, right? And slowly, human beings have evolved these different kinds of astrology, and we have so many people having conversations with the heavens, or at least trying to understand them. And sometimes it feels like there's something on the other side saying, boy, I wish we could just tell you all this stuff, but we can't. So here's these symbols. Here are these symbols you can try to understand. But there's people in India looking at things very differently than people in, I don't know, England, right? We're going to get into some of that today, tropical and sidereal and issues like that. But I think it's kind of, here's where we don't have humility. Here's where I'm not promoting this. Obviously, I'm promoting a humble approach in holistic astrology. And when we're not humble is here, when we look at another type of astrology, maybe practiced by an awful lot of people, and just sort of get this chip on our shoulder about it and say, oh, well, my thing is better. And mostly it's just because it's what you came across first. Like, trust me, if you had been born in some place where you came across Vedic astrology first, rather than some other Western astrology, you'd probably be doing Vedic astrology right now, and vice versa. So we somehow look at, like, let's say millions of people on the other side of the world, and let's say they're doing Vedic astrology when we're tropical Western astrologers. And, I'm surprised at how many astrologers I have come across, well-known, very intelligent astrologers in other capacities, who just sort of dismiss an entire astrological culture, like as if that makes any sense at all. It doesn't. It's like saying, oh, all of you people over there practicing Buddhism or, Hinduism or Christianity or any religion, well, you guys are all wrong. Your conversation with God is wrong. It's not right. Mine's right. My conversation's right because I use this zodiac and this house system, and I use this calculation for the nodes, and I use this, calculation for the solar returns. And, there's a lot of ways you can try to differentiate yourself like that. And what happens is we end up, separating ourselves from each other and not being able to hear each other. I like the analogy of the blind man, or the blind men and the elephant, a lot. And so that's kind of what we do. Like, we make ourselves blind men who can't talk to the other men or women who are touching different parts of the elephant. And the elephant is the universe, it's God, it's life, it's what astrology is trying to point us at. It's like the truth of it all. It's a reflection of the truth of it all. And when we don't have that humility is when we say, oh, everyone who's doing sidereal astrology is wrong, or everyone who's doing tropical astrology is wrong, or something like it. It's really absurd. It's absurd. It's as absurd as like a Christian walking into a synagogue and telling the Jews they're doing it wrong, or anything like that. Okay, so I'm not about that, obviously. And now here's the thing: if I researched these astrologies and I found that one of them was just so superior to the other one didn't really have anything of value, the other one was just this pale imitation of some true astrology, right? Then I would just do the true astrology, right? I would just do the one that works. I'm going to stop the share for a minute because I'm just talking for a bit. So we have to kind of have real human humility here and go, wait a minute, maybe these other really intelligent human beings who have done just a different kind of astrology are really onto something, and maybe they're touching a different part of the elephant. So, that's where I begin, is this thing that kind of dawns on me a little more every day. As I've been doing astrology a long time, but just that it's like quite a really divine kind of function that we're playing, the spiritual function of trying to translate things that comes straight from the vastness of it all, right? So anyway, I think it's quite a beautiful thing, but we have to have some humility. And when we do, we can learn things. How about that? When we don't have humility, we can't learn anything because we think we know everything, right? We're arrogant. And there's a great deal of arrogance in the astrological community. There's a great deal of arrogance in any kind of astrology. Every kind of astrology has people who are very arrogant and think that other people, are just sort of lost doing some astrology that makes no sense. And really, here's where I can respect. So first, for example, like a lot of people who watch this will be into EA. I'm not an EA person. Stephen Forrest is a good friend of mine. I have a lot of friends who are into EA. I don't really identify with EA as in kind of an astrology. At the same time, I do some of the same things you guys do in EA. Like I look at the moon's nodes and I, look at them from some past life angles and stuff like that. But I've just not really, identified with any particular thing like that. But I can appreciate every kind of astrology because I know you're having your conversation with the heavens, with God, with the universe, that the universe loves you, that it's showing you stuff, it's showing you symbols to try to communicate with you, to try to help you become more aware. So even if someone does a kind of astrology like isn't my kind of astrology, I respect it, just like I respect if you have a different religion than me, and that you can have a conversation with God in an intimate relationship with the universe and consciousness that is your own beautiful sacred thing. And so that's one of the principles here is humility. And that's not to say that's the only application of humility. It is a broad principle. It's a word. I'm giving you 6 words here, and I'm encouraging you to, maybe just think about how they could apply to your practice or your studies as an astrologer. So that's one of the things, one of the basic principles of holistic astrology. So let's do flexibility. Let's continue to round out some of these ideas. So flexibility, I just thought of sort of making a kind of a comment in each direction, under each term. So for flexibility, you get into astrology and you may have a particular teacher, and that teacher may tell you, this is the zodiac you use, this is the house system you use, maybe these are the orbs that you use, you should use the mean node or the true node calculation. There could be any number of rules that someone might give you. The tendency when you get into astrology is to assume that the first thing that you heard is true, is the thing, right? Just like life, right? Like probably the first religion you heard, you're probably going to be more predisposed to believe in, right? Or the country you grew up in, you're probably more predisposed to believe that that country is patriotic or something like that. So you got to be really aware, first of all, that the first stuff you learn, you're going to have a massive bias toward that information. And that's where you're weak, because you will tend to assume that information is really ironclad true, when it's kind of just one way to see it. It's just one way of putting your hand on the elephant and feeling part of it. It's just not that way. But our minds want to make things very certain, very fixed, either or, and then I got it. And then I am this astrologer who has figured out all these things, and it's my way, and it's good, right? And it's, and I just think it's ridiculous. I think it's really silly. I'm someone now. Let me give you a little taste of sidereal astrology, right? So if you do, my tropical ascendant is Scorpio, and my sidereal ascendant is Libra. And if you look in my, sidereal chart, I would have Uranus in Libra if you do that. So here's what I'll tell you about tropical and sidereal. We'll start to get into that. Sidereal is very, very powerful, just as tropical is very, very powerful, but they're slightly different. And it's like slightly different ways of looking at the elephant. And when we talk about sidereal, the ascendant is like the person, okay? So Donald Trump, for example, is a Leo rising, actually both ways. I call it that double Leo because it's Leo Vedic, Leo, tropical or sidereal. But who is Donald Trump? Like, he's a Leo, okay? And, where is the sun in his sidereal chart? It's in Taurus in the 10th house with the North Node Rahu. So he's totally driven toward these 10th house things, like Taurus, like money, like Rahu, like, fame and whatever, right? So objectively speaking, that's what sidereal astrology is. Then why is sidereal astrology more objective, arguably, than tropical astrology? And I will argue that. Because it's a different way of looking at everything. And I think the best analogy is when you look at sidereal astrology, that's what, they're doing mostly in India. You're basically looking at the planets against the stars. And we kind of do that in the West too, but it's the thing is with a zodiac, like we have a circle, it's 360 degrees. You have to decide where that circle starts. You have to pick a point somewhere. So if you have a sidereal zodiac, you have to pin, the zodiac to a star. So what they've done in India, the Indian government says the Lahiri Ayanamsha is the official government sanctioned Ayanamsha. And the way that works is Lahiri says that the star Chitra or Spica, which is the most auspicious star according to the history of astrology for the most part, is at 29, 59, 59, 59 Virgo. It's at the very, 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 very end of Virgo. So what they've done is they put a pin in the heavens at Spica and said, or Chitra, and said that is 29, 59, 59 Virgo. And now we can do a circle because now we have a place to put that pin, right? So you got to fit that zodiac into the circle and then lock it in. Okay, so the Lahiri Ayanamsha says 29, 59 Virgo is Spica, Chitra. There's our zodiac. We got it now. Okay, the Western zodiac, of course, tropical, is based on seasons. So when the sun reaches the vernal equinox It's a sun-moon relationship kind of thing. When it reaches the vernal equinox, we say that where the sun is right there is 0 Aries. And that's just another way to put the pin in the circle and start the zodiac, or place the zodiac in some sort of fixed kind of position. So when you look at sidereal astrology, it's not like the seasons. That's always the analogy I like to use. The tropical astrology is like the seasons. So if you get to know me as a person, and you get to know me as a person, you will get to know my tropical astrology in a way that you will feel. Like any person, if you get to know them, you will feel their tropical astrology. It is like weather. It is like the seasons. It's like, the hot, sticky summer. It's whatever you want to describe the weather as. It's got this personal kind of quality about it, and it feels real. Like because we experience it. Like, go outside in the middle of winter and see what you feel. Right, you're going to feel it. Just like someone with 7 planets in Capricorn is going to feel kind of like winter in some respect, right? But that's tropical. And sidereal is really very different when you think about it, because instead of looking at something that's so close to the earth, like our seasons, it's the stars. It is these constellations. Now in India, they have the nakshatras, like 27 nakshatras, and the moon goes through one every day. So they have some of their own, it's like their own zodiac. But when you look at sidereal astrology, you're looking at a person as if they're like a constellation in the heavens. So they're kind of very distant and objective. So it's very objective is what I mean to say. So I was saying for myself, I'm a Libra in sidereal astrology rising with Uranus in Libra in the ascendant. So that should be like me. That should describe me. We could look at where my Venus is. It's in Leo in the 11th house and yada, yada. Okay, that would fill in more details. This is all sidereal, by the way. But I would offer this to you right now. You may have just known me for a few minutes here now. Do I seem like Libra, Uranus in Libra? Uranus, am I bringing, some kind of perspective, trying to challenge the way things have been and try to bring something a little revolutionary to the picture? Okay, maybe. But Libra, am I saying you have to look at tropical and sidereal, this and that? That's almost the crux of everything I'm saying, which is that the mistakes that we make are when we try to make everything one way, when it's not actually that way. Sometimes one thing is superior to another thing, and then you use the superior thing. Many times you have two things that are quite useful, and we make a mistake when we throw a baby out with the bathwater. We choose, because maybe our mind likes it when we just decide one thing is the way that it is, and we feel comfortable in our own heads, so we decide, well, that's just how it is. Well, you know what? You got clients, if you got clients, and they're trying to actually figure some stuff out. So you have a responsibility to do your very best to understand what's going on in their chart and their astrology. And, I do locational work, which is it's a huge responsibility. And I believe astrologers collectively don't really know what they're doing that well with locational astrology. I'm very clear on that. And so I have to look at everything I can look at, because if I make a mistake, it could really hurt somebody, and I'm not about that, I'm in this to help people, right? So that's one of the reasons I believe that it pays to be open to looking at different things, particularly if you're helping people with serious stuff, where they could, where if you make a mistake, it actually, has tremendous consequences potentially. So again, that's me at an objective distance. I am Uranus and Libra with Libra rising, because here I am saying, you guys got to look at both. You got to look at, tropical, sidereal, got to integrate the locational stuff. You got to be kind of curious, look at it from both ways. Got to have, some humility about it. So, in a way, that's just kind of an obvious fact of who am I, right? This is a very, very useful way to actually understand a chart. Just change, if you do tropical astrology, just change the chart to sidereal, just focus on the first house picture. What is the sign? Are there planets there? Where is the dispositor place? And you can even pretend it's tropical if you don't do tropical, and just read it, but read it from the sense that this is the objective constellational view of the person, right? And very often, I very often put the tropical and sidereal charts. I always look at both. So I often kind of look at someone and say, let's say maybe I pull out a famous person or something. And I say, does the tropical chart reflect them better, or does the sidereal chart reflect them better? And it's often it could be one or the others. It's pretty equal. But, a lot of times I will give the sidereal a little edge when it comes to just getting the obvious thing. Who is this person really? If I had to pick tropical or sidereal for that, objectively, what is this person? Are they a famous artist? Are they, someone who struggled their entire, what are they kind of objectively? Sidereal, I actually think is better for that. Now, then tropical becomes better for something else too. And that is, I think it is better as we get more and more interior. And that's why I think, for example, here's a neat thing with house systems I was thinking about today. You know, whole sign houses were the main house system used by astrologers for the longest time. And that's still true in India. They still mostly use whole sign houses. But then we got this, different house systems came along in the more modern times. And I forget the history on Placidus, right? But Placidus is a very commonly used, probably the most commonly used house system, I think, in modern Western astrology, even just in Western astrology, maybe at this point. Just collect a thought here while I'm sipping my water. Since I did say there could be questions too, you guys feel free to drop those in there if you have them at any point. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I can actually see where the questions would be. Okay, so there's a chat screen there. Okay, and nothing in the chat yet, so that is good. All right, let's see. Sorry, I'm just getting my camera thing set up here as well. Okay, so what sucks is losing your train of thought. Where was I? I was talking about sidereal. I was talking about tropical and sidereal, and I was getting something and I lost my train of thought.
So I'll interrupt then, Moses, and maybe it'll bring you back. I'm curious about how you can switch back and forth between tropical and sidereal.
Okay.
Does it get confusing?
Right. Okay, so switching back and forth. So yeah, I think I can speak to that and maybe get back around to where I was. So
okay.
So it's kind of like let's say you do, now if you do Vedic astrology, it's kind of like, you have a Rashi chart, that's the natal chart, and you have a Navamsha chart, that's the ninth harmonic. Both of those charts could be very important charts for the person. They could show you two very important aspects of the person, kind of like a second opinion. In Western astrology, I think maybe the best parallel would be if you have the natal chart as well as the secondary progress chart, and you might read both, let's say. Now, the secondary progress chart does evolve. It does change over time, so it's not a perfect maybe analogy, but you kind of get two charts, and you can kind of get two opinions, right? And you kind of blend those in a way. It's really that simple. It's really as simple as saying, here's one way of looking at the person, and here's another way of looking at the person. I was actually tutoring someone earlier today, and I told her something I haven't actually said as explicitly as I told her, but she's a tropical astrologer, doesn't really want to pick up sidereal, and I made a small case for like doing some of that. Because I said, what I told her as far as that goes was, here's what I tell people. If you do tropical, I would highly recommend, in fact, I would even beg you, particularly if you do locational work, to look at the essential dignities, just basic essential dignities, from the sidereal point of view, and vice versa. So if you do sidereal and Vedic astrology, and let's say, to bring it to locational for a minute, let's say someone's Venus line, and maybe they're thinking about moving to the Venus line. Well, look at the Vedic chart if that's what you do, if that's what you know, if that's your bread and butter, but just consider the dignities, right, from the tropical as well. So if a planet, moves into a sign of greater dignity, like a sign of rulership or exaltation from one system to the other, it tells you an awful lot. And if you did nothing else, and you're doing especially locational work where you're like, oh, should I go move to my sun line? Well, at least just consider the dignities both ways. And part of how I start to blend these is sometimes sometimes you look for overlap, and that's a lot of what I try to do, is look for the things that kind of overlap between the systems as well. I was just saying earlier, just to finish one thing I was saying, which is, sidereally, I'm this Libra, Uranus in Libra. That's who I am objectively as a constellation at a distance. I should be that, and I can tell you other things I've done in my life that are kind of like that. Like I was like very active when I was in college. I started a student organization and magazine, all kinds of stuff. So I've always been kind of like into that kind of like Uranian revolutionary, let's make progress for humanity kind of thing. I've always just been like that. But my Scorpio is my tropical ascendant. So if you get to know me personally, and you're seeing me right now, I'm a Scorpio, right? And so there's a different feeling there. And that's why actually I like tropical astrology better for relationships and synastry. I really, really feel that. I really feel that tropical is just better for that because it's much more personal. It's much more like that. And I just give a quick personal example of that. I remember I dated someone who had the same day, born the same exact day as me. We had the same exact Vedic rising sign. We had the same Libra rising sign in Vedic astrology, born the same exact day. But our tropical ascendant was different. She was Libra and I was Scorpio, you know. And I've seen a kind of a similar but opposite situation. And basically that situation didn't actually work because even though she and I were both sidereal Libras, in other words, objectively, we were people who you could say Libra things about. And she, you know, that's we get into bigger stuff with that. But on a personal level, like that's where people really get along. I think it's more the tropical. So my Scorpio ascendant and her Libra ascendant, you know what? They don't really get along that well. Those two signs both like relationships, so they can kind of get into being in a relationship. But they're anytime you have two signs that are next to each other, they're adjacent to each other, they actually don't get along that well, you know, because they're just very different. And so, you know, Scorpio wants to be very intense and Libra wants to keep things kind of light and fun or whatever it is. Like you find these ways that they just will contrast with each other. So she and I didn't get along that well because of my Scorpio and her Libra, you could argue, even though, you know, our Libra ascendants were the same. And you know, I've seen other situations where you do the same thing in reverse and it works when the tropical works. Actually, yeah, actually the person I was married to for 19 years, Scorpio rising for me, Virgo rising for her. Our ascendants were in harmony. My Scorpio got along with her Virgo for 19 years-ish. But our sidereal ascendants were adjacent. Mine is Libra and hers is Virgo. And we got along actually pretty well for 19 years. You know what I mean? So the sidereal, that's an example. The sidereal wouldn't really work in that case. It doesn't really explain how I got along or didn't get along with that person. But tropical, I think, is actually better for that. So see, you see, a lot of it is like learning what is this good for? What is this tool good for? What is this tool good for? Let me use this tool for this purpose and this tool for this purpose. So if I compare two people to see if they're compatible, you know, let's say someone meets a new love interest, I'm going to compare their tropical. I really do tropical, you know, maybe that's because that's how I learned astrology initially, but I even when I compare it, it still seems like the tropical is better for that. And so, you know, it's not that one of these is better and one of those worse. They're better for different things. I think if you had to give me, let me give you an example. I think I'm getting back to what I was trying to say a while ago. I forgot about. So you think of EA, you think of a system like a quadrant system like Placidus. That's what I was trying to say. Placidus came on the scene, and you know it became the predominant house system in the West. And a lot of people would look at that and say, let's say you're more of a traditional mindset astrologer. You say, well, maybe that's just an error. Maybe that's just this modern thing, and people should have used the old thing, and therefore this is wrong, right? No, you can have that point of view. And you might be right, you might be wrong, or it might be an opinion. But I look at that and I think, well, why did that happen? Like, why did we stop using whole sign houses if that was so commonly in practice for so long? How did we collectively stop using a house system that everybody was using, supposedly, right? It's very strange to think about it, but there are reasons why, you know, Placidus became popular. And it's just sort of some practical stuff. But I think about it and I think, why? You know, because I believe astrology is very, very heavenly. Like it's, I believe that the I don't know what to call it, the great mystery is trying to communicate with us or have some reflection of us that we can study. And so it's like this gift, you know, so why would Placidus come around? And, you know, I actually did some research at one point where I studied transits to my different house cusps in my chart to see, you know, which house system maybe seemed the strongest. And I do remember what was interesting about Placidus, and I don't use Placidus personally, but what was very interesting about it is whenever an event would hit a Placidus house cusp, I would notice that the event would tend to be more in the mind, more psychological, more mental. And then I look at the fact that, look at psychological astrology. It's typically tropical zodiac, Placidus houses. And I actually think that is the best for that. If you want to do psychological astrology, you should probably be using tropical zodiac and Placidus houses. Now, what is an opposite? What would be opposite to that? Well, first of all, sidereal, not tropical. And whole signs, actually, rather than, you know, Placidus. So if you guys who don't know what I'm saying here, you know, here Stephen Forrest is a chart we might play with here today. Probably the most, we'll see. But this chart happens to be cast in the Porphyry house system. I'm just going to double check so that everything's good with the camera, because I do see you in the top left right now, but I want to make sure that that's all correct.
All good.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you. And so where are we here? This is a Placidus house system. So if you're using whole sign houses,
But I do not see your chart, if that's
let
what
me
you're
show my
asking.
chart. That's what I
Yeah.
forgot.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can get my Zoom thing back up here and we'll do it. I don't see all my Zoom controls. Where'd they go? Huh. Okay.
Do you see the little blue camera down at the bottom?
I do actually, and I'm clicking on it and not much is happening. Let me see.
Is it minimized?
Exit minimized video. There we go. Okay, sharing screen. All right, so I'm sharing screen again, yeah. So
Yes,
anyway,
beautiful.
Stephen Forrest tropical here. And if you were using his chart and doing whole signs, you would say everything in Scorpio is in his first house, right? So no, wait a minute, what am I doing? Is this right? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I pulled this off of in my solar fire. So for example, one of the differences is that all of his Capricorn planets, Jupiter, Sun, and Mercury, they would be in the third house if you do whole signs. So anyway, when you have a chart, let's make this Placidus actually. Just I don't normally do Placidus, but Placidus, one of the things that I don't like, one of the reasons that I just sort of don't like a system like Placidus, it's not as uniform. It's more, but this is also what makes it good psychologically, is it makes it more peculiar. It makes it more unique to the individual. See, notice how like the houses are different, right? Like I use porphyry, where you can't get a 12th house that's way smaller than a 10th house. It just doesn't happen in porphyry. But it does over here. But I do want to argue that this has potential to give insight into the psychology of the individual, because it is very, very, very specific to the moment. The house angles are very specific. The cusps are specific. And so there's an interior quality to very tropical astrology. But what if I want to see Stephen Forrest in the most objective way possible? Like I didn't know who this guy was, and you said, hey, here's this chart. Who is this person? Well, no. Okay, this is a South Indian chart, and some of you watching will say, thank you, you're giving me an Indian chart. I think most of the people watching this are tropical Western, so I'm going to go back to a circular chart in just a moment here. But let me show a South Indian chart. And for those of you who don't know how this works, this shows his we're using Lahiri Ayanamsha. And so he's got this slash here shows that he's got Scorpio as his first house. So Stephen is a double Scorpio rising. He's Scorpio Western, Scorpio Vedic. So he should be particularly Scorpio. Is he really into, like, I don't know, occult mysteries like astrology? Yeah, maybe, right? So yeah, we say that's pretty accurate. So he's a double Scorpio. Now, a double Scorpio can mean all sorts of things. Someone else could be a double Scorpio and they might be the most vengeful person you've ever met, right? Like there's a whole spectrum of possibilities to what it is to be doubly Scorpio, right? Extra Scorpio. But this, now let me change it to a circular chart. So for those of you who are like, oh my God, what are these square? And it is weird to see that when you're not used to it. Okay, so we're going to go to a whole sign chart. Actually, yeah, that's what I want. Okay, whole sign Lahiri and Okay, so did I get what I wanted there? No, not yet. Hang on. Aha. Okay, so now I'm basically seeing his Vedic chart. And so if you're a Vedic astrologer, you can now pretty much read this as far as, like, Scorpio is the first house. There's Venus and Scorpio. Sag is the second house. There's Sun, Jupiter, Sagittarius. Now, very often what I was saying is that the sidereal chart will give you the most accurate, objective view of the person. I would actually say that for Stephen, because his Sun Jupiter conjunction, I think, is a very, 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 very good example of that. Because Stephen has a Sun Jupiter conjunction Capricorn, okay, in tropical. It's about 4 degrees apart. So it's technically combust, right? So there's something going on there where if you follow the guidelines of like traditional astrology, Jupiter's not strong here. It's in a difficult sign. It's combust with the sun. So if you're going to read his chart and try to be objective about it, you might see that and think, oh, maybe this guy, maybe his Jupiter isn't the strongest, which is of course absurd if you know Stephen, right? Now I'm not saying that everybody has issues, but this is Stephen Forrest sidereally, where he is a Sun in Sagittarius, conjunct Jupiter in Sagittarius in the second house. And by the way, the houses, I think you can absolutely blend the meanings of the houses. If anything is true about the houses, it will be true both ways. So if the Vedic astrologers say something about the second house that is true, it will be true in tropical as well. And I can say that because particularly my work with locational work has been to research the houses and test them to an absurd degree. And frankly, I don't like, nobody gets to do that in astrology like I have done, because I've looked at 5 bazillion relocated charts and tested them and said, hey, when you lived here, did this happen? When you lived here, was it like this? I've done that tens of thousands of times with charts. Like I've done a ton of research into that. And so I can speak from authority and confidence because I'm just speaking from stuff I know from experience. And so Stephen Forrest over here, for example, the second house in Vedic astrology is connected with the throat, the mouth. So the face, your speech. You know, do you have a nice voice? Or do you have maybe a nice singing voice? So someone who's a speaker, you should expect very often to see very strong second house things. How about, you know, Sun conjunct Jupiter and Sagittarius, right? Does that sound like someone who wants to travel the world, write a bunch of books, spread a philosophy, uplift people, connect them with this, you know, their spirituality? See, objectively speaking, that's Stephen Forrest. That's who he is. That you know, you just look at him and not even know anything about him personally. You can have never met him personally, but you know, you go, oh, this guy's written a bunch of astrology books. He seems pretty successful and all that. So again, sidereal, it's just what it is. It's just, okay, that's just who you are. Deal with it. You know, you got to deal with who you are. And sidereally, you know, there's that sense of like, okay, what is your life actually, objectively speaking? And, you know, like look at, for example, Stephen, right? So he had Scorpio rising both ways, double Scorpio. He had Mars in Aquarius in the tropical. He has Mars in Capricorn in the serial. So it's an exalted Mars. This is a stronger chart for that reason, or quite arguably. The the Lord of the Ascendant, Mars, traditionally is Mars, is exalted. It's in his most emphasized, most powerful, or very arguably the most positive sign for Mars in traditional astrology. So this is just objectively who he is. It's in the third house. Does he get around a lot? Does he, you know, do travel a lot? Does he write a lot? Does he, you know, in Vedic astrology, we'll tell you the third house has something to do with passion and courage as well. So you put a very strong Mars there. Is this guy going to have some passion and courage? Yeah. So hopefully that's a quick introduction to some of that, you know, now get to know Stephen personally. And this Sun Jupiter Capricorn thing is quite significant. You know, Stephen's quite a humble guy, right? You know, he's very Capricorn in a lot of ways, you know. So that's a different thing. That's his personality. That's his psychology. That's that. Now, your character is also your destiny. Here's where these things kind of start to bleed into each other. You know, I mean, who you are, who you believe, or how you feel, like that tends to have its own momentum too. So the opposite of Placidus houses and tropical zodiac, which is a very psychological approach to astrology, Placidus tropical. The opposite of that is sidereal whole signs. And here's where, you know, I'm very much into dialectic. I'm very much into taking two things that are opposite, that don't seem to belong together. What happens if you sort of combine them in some way? What you know, can you get some third thing out of them that's even cooler than they are by themselves? Well, you should be able to, right? You know, put peanut butter and jelly together, it should be able to get something better out of it, right? So that's what I'm trying to do here, is like combine the things in a very simple way. Like what I'm doing here is in some respects extremely simple, and in some ways extremely more complicated, because it just gets into a few more things that, you know, people may not have studied. And so I very often will tell Vedic astrologers, here, you guys could look more at this, and Western astrologers, here, you guys could look more at this. And generally it's the cool stuff from Vedic that the Westerners need to learn, and vice versa. And I test things in a sense of like, is this really true both ways, or is it not? And when it's true both ways, I'm not going to be shy about telling you that it is. So the second house, let's just talk about a house. Second house is very misunderstood as a house by Western astrologers. It is really misunderstood. And I have thoughts on it that add both the Vedic side, but also some of my own thoughts that get into a little bit deeper into it too. So here's an introduction to the houses in holistic astrology. And we're just going to do one, I think, which is second house. And I think I'm okay on time, right? So tell me if I need to shut up at any point. So
No, you're fine.
Okay. Right, 1 second. Okay, so I apologize for losing my train of thought again. What was I about to talk about? There's some kind of, you know,
second house.
The guides are just kind of, I just got to reconnect to the guides, and they'll keep talking here, I think. So, so the second house, All right. So, most people think of the second house and they think of it in terms of making money. And that's a very important part of the second house, making money. I would say making money to support yourself. But let's think about this more holistically, actually. And I did write this article. The one I had written in the Mountain Astrologer that was published was called it's about 20 years ago, actually, the spiritual dimension of Taurus. You kind of read that. It's on my website. It's got a lot of the same meaning as the second house. Now, one of the arguments I'm going to make in holistic astrology, I'm definitely prepared to have some debates, and I'm going to win them, is that the signs and houses correlate virtually perfectly. Like, in other words, the second house has the same essence and meanings of Taurus. Taurus is a place where Venus rules, where the moon is exalted. And in holistic astrology, I use Ceres and I use Chiron, and I am very convinced Ceres rules Taurus in modern astrology and works extremely well for that. So Taurus is a place where a lot of benefic energies get together. Ceres is the Earth mother. We'll talk about her, I think, here too. She's extremely important to consider as a benefic, and she's not given nearly enough credit for being this massively feminine, nurturing, supportive, earthy, benefic energy. But that's another story. So second house has these themes. Which planets do we just talk about? Moon, exalted in Taurus. Venus, right, rules Taurus. Ceres, I would argue, rules Taurus. And you can just do astrology different ways. I don't think you have to do it, in the modern way. You can do it the old way. It's fine. But this house gets into things. So, for example, in Vedic astrology, they will talk about the family. Like the second house will show you things about family. And I never came across that idea in Western astrology. I don't know about you guys, but no one ever told me that you're going to see family in the second house. But when you think about it logically, actually, this is kind of a lunar place. It's kind of a Venus place. So relationships, actually, they are probably pretty important when the moon and Venus are the planets connected with Taurus, which is connected to the sign. I believe these principles are not identical. I'm not saying they're exactly the same. I'm not saying this Taurus is the second house or anything like that. But I'm saying that the archetypal vibrational similarity is so strong that you have to be blind to miss it. And I'm going to argue with a lot of people about that. And I think I'm going to win because I'm going to lay all that out. But people have different opinions about it, obviously. But in the second house, there's a lot going on. And there's this element, for example, of family. And let me tell you, if you see something in the second house and it's not pleasant looking, you see difficult things in the second house, that's not a great family background. In other words, there's going to be, abuse, drugs or alcohol. There's going to be, all this drama. There's divorce. So when you see, let's say, very tough looking things in the second house, that person, you can be pretty damn sure, did not come from a nice little family. In other words, they had a lot they had to overcome. And so we get into these different meanings, like family, like speech, like, using your voice for something. Dennis Harness, well-known Vedic astrologer, he told me that about, a famous astrologer who told him that if you have a very strong second house, you'll write books. I don't know. He says that. I don't know if I've even seen that, but he told me that one time. And I do think the second house has something to do with education, particularly when you're getting an education to make money. Now, holistically, I would say the second house, and maybe this whole second principle, is about being self-sufficient, right? That's the principle of it. So in the second house, we learn to be self-sufficient. And sometimes that just means make money and support myself. But it can mean a lot of things. It can mean, even intellectually separating yourself from other influences. But more often what it means is in relationships, where let's say you have a very second house chart, or you relocate to a place where you have a very second house chart. The emphasis there is learning to be self-sufficient. It is how to be whole on every level, emotionally, spiritually, financially, intellectually. How do we form this kind of like, perfect, happy little Taurus, kind of like Winnie the Pooh vibe, where, there's just this happy little self there. And so what will happen in the second house that's not often known is, for example, people get into a lot of trouble. They'll get into addictions, for example. They'll get into the ways that we run away from ourselves instead of just being at peace, like being able to sit, being able to meditate. So when you run away, that's a surprisingly second house, kind of thing. And sometimes it's in relationship, like we're codependent and we can't be on our own. Like that could be a second house kind of problem. So I tell people, like, let's say they relocate to a place there's a lot of second house. I would say, in general, this is not really that supportive of a relationship if that's your goal. And a lot of people are looking for that, of course, because the theme is about to support yourself. It's not really about, interdependency, which would be more like seventh or eighth house, or, so there's all this depth in the second house that is completely missed when you just say, oh, it's about, making money and supporting yourself. Or people say it's about values. And I kind of like have never resonated super well with that for the second house. I don't think it's wrong. It's just for me, I don't get a lot of information out of that. I don't go, oh, this is values. And then what do I tell the person? I don't know. For me, it's just not really useful. And I don't know how true it is either. I don't know if that's really what it's about, because it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't grab me. And I've been doing this for a while. Um, this is an example of, and again, the reason why I can say some of these things and be very confident about the houses in particular is because when I work with someone, let's say I work with a client, I might, they might have lived 20 places. I'm going to relocate their chart to all of those places and look at all of those charts typically. And if they're going to consider 20 more places, I'm going to relocate to all of those places and look at all of those, which means just with that client, I've gotten 20 examples of when they lived in places and stuff happened to them. And then 20 more examples of stuff I can predict what will happen to them. So what I'm able to test because of how I read the relocated chart, and I read it in a way that I had never expected to. I kind of learned it as I went. Like I felt like the astrology showed me essentially how it worked just by like working, just by being right in front of my face and working. I go, oh, that's how that works. So I learned stuff as I did this. And what that allowed me to do is to test theories around the houses, test how things manifest in different positions around the houses. And there's a science to it, that there's a whole approach to it that I teach in my class. And it's very learnable, actually. It's very simple, but it takes a minute to get it before you can really understand it. And once you get it, it's really, really potent. So this gets into precision, which is one of the other words, that I talk about in holistic astrology. Let me give you a quick example of precision. Stephen Forrest. Stephen Forrest has the moon in tropical at 3 degrees, 21 minutes of Aries, and the porphyry, this is porphyry houses, the porphyry fifth house cusp is 3 degrees and 10. It's virtually the same. It's 1/6 of a degree apart. So if you do EA, if you do Western astrology, you probably don't know that the proximity to that cusp, in particular porphyry, which has been used since ancient astrology in a variety of ways. The Hindu astrologers have used it in terms of Shripati. It's a house system which uses the porphyry cusps, basically. What porphyry does is it trisects these quadrants equally. So the 4th, 5th, and 6th houses are exactly the same size. But each quadrant is trisected. And what is true is that these points are extraordinarily sensitive, very, very, very powerful. And what Westerners don't understand this. They don't understand, and I don't think Vedic astrologers do either, actually. I learned this through researching locational astrology. That's how I learned this. And what you learn is how to judge how the proximity to that cusp and how significant it is. In this case, it's virtually, direct conjunction, right? It's almost the same exact degree a minute. Well, it's, quite close anyway. So if I'm reading Stephen Forrest's chart, and because this is something that people do in Western astrology, they say, well, how do I know what to emphasize? How do I integrate? How do I, take all these different pieces that seem to say something and form a complete picture that also, what you should be looking to do is not only put that together into a picture, but differentiate which parts are stronger, weaker, so that you get even more information, right? Even more definition and clarity. So look at Stephen Forrest's chart, and I go to his chart and I go, oh, wait a minute, look how close his moon is to the 5th house cusp. See, that really jumps out at me when I look at this chart, because I know how powerful these cusps are. Now, the other very, very powerful cusp to consider is the rising degree, which could be called equal house. So what I'll do here is we'll draw up another chart for Stephen, if I can get this to work here. So I'm going to go show you what I do with actually I can do it right here. No, I'll do another one. I'll just show you a dual wheel. So when I think of a chart in Western astrology, I'm basically seeing it with 3 houses in my mind. It's not that hard. It sounds like it's hard. It's really not that hard. Once you get used to it. I think of whole sign houses. Whole sign houses are the easiest thing on earth to imagine, because the entire sign is the house, right? It's really, really, really easy once you get the hang of that to imagine. Like if you tell me, oh, my rising sign is Virgo. Okay, well, I know your 10th house is Gemini. Like it's not hard to imagine that. Now the other 2 is where it gets more interesting. So let's open up Stephen Forrest from the astrologers here. And this time I'm going to change his chart to equal house. It defaults to Plastus in this database, but we're going to go equal. So now I'm going to do what Solar Fire is going to let me do this as I believe it's a dual wheel. It's going to show me two charts at the same time. So this is dual wheels. There we go. We have Stephen Porphyry and we have Stephen equal house. Okay. So two charts. And again, we have this silly tendency as astrologers to go, which one is right? Stop that. Smack, smack, smack. It's not that at all. Look at this one and try to say, well, can I learn something? Look at this one. Can I learn something? Do they both say something? Do they both point at something? They do. I'm 1000% sure of that because I've tested this in locational astrology a bazillion times. These charts are brilliant. They work really well. Now, over here, I'm looking at this 24-degree rising, and I'm looking for anything near 24 because that's going to be at the equal house cusp. Interestingly, for Stephen, actually, it's Ceres. Ceres is not even 1/3 of 1 degree from his from the midheaven there, which is because we're using using equal is the same as the ascendant, so 24 23, so not the midheaven but the 10th house cusp is 24 23. So if I were to say, try to understand Stephen Forrest's life like with just these two things, I'm going to pull out two things: Moon in Aries with the 5th house, Ceres conjunct the 10th cusp is what I'm going to call this. Ceres conjunct the 10th cusp. So now, would an Aries moon? No, I actually consider him Aries / Pisces. Why? Because that's tropical sidereal. So Aries is the tropical, and Pisces is the sidereal. So this is an Aries Pisces moon, and it's extremely 5th house. Now, what do we know about the 5th house? Now, this is a very cool thing from Vedic astrology that you might not know, but the fiery houses, the 1, 5, and the 9, they're called Dharma houses or Trikona houses. These are super auspicious places. These are really blessed places. And the more planets you see in those houses in someone's chart, the more lucky their life is going to be, the more protected their life is going to be. And generally speaking, this is an idea of good past life credit. It's purva punya, from Hindu astrology. This looks like good past life credit. This looks like Stephen Forrest gets to have a moon with a ton of good past life credit in this lifetime. And what does he get to do with it? 5th house stuff. Gets to be super creative, gets to write a bunch of books, right? Gets to be a teacher, gets to advise people, gets to be an Aries, gets to lead a kind of astrology, right? To initiate new ways of thinking about astrology. But that this is ridiculously important because of the proximity to that cusp. That's precision. That's an example of precision. Now, what about Ceres? Some of you guys might not be used to Ceres, but Ceres, imagine Ceres as like the female Jupiter. She's kind of like the moon if the moon wasn't so moody. Ceres is like, it's instead of being like a Cancer, it's more like a Taurus, right? Because the moon rules Cancer and Ceres rules Taurus. So Ceres is much more here. Let me give you nice stuff all the time. Let me try to, feed you and be nice to you. It has a more consistent benefic quality than the moon because the moon waxes and wanes. So this is the mother in the chart that doesn't wax and wane. Ceres, though, does have her own themes and issues, which is a different story. But Ceres in Leo. Now, interestingly for me, this is double Leo. Why? Because it's Leo in his Vedic chart too. If we go to sidereal, he's still going to have Ceres in Leo. So now I'm thinking Stephen Forrest, he should have this really benefic thing at the top at 10th house. So maybe he's going to be really famous. Ceres, I'm thinking this is really quite positive. Ceres is so generous. So if Ceres at your 10th, it's a good chance you have a really nice career, especially if it's precisely like this, right? Precisely 90 degrees from the ascendant at the same degree as the ascendant. Pretty much exactly there. And it's in Leo. So what is Leo? Leo is a teacher. Leo is the center of attention. Leo is ruled by the sun. What is the sun? It's the center of the solar system. So he is a leader, a teacher, a positive, inspiring person. So does that encapsulate him quite well, right? The Ceres double Leo at the 10th house cusp with this incredibly creative, good past life credit that we expect from this sort of moon here. The moon is waxing, so it's not. So it's getting out. It's going to increase its energy, kind of get out and be more zesty to get out and do stuff. So I think that's an example of precision. And there's different ways to do that. And we get into locational astrology. There's a lot of precision. There's a lot of, this place isn't as good as that place, even though they're 30 miles apart. And I can very often differentiate that because the astrology is right in front of my face. It's really not that hard once you kind of figure out how to do it. And I had to figure out how to do a lot of it. I really did, because locational astrology is not that well understood. It's just not. And so it's brand new. So why should it be well understood? I mean, do we really think that in a tradition where astrology is thousands of years old, and Jim Lewis in the 70s basically was starting to make people aware of locational astrology and astrocartography, do we really think that's fully formed? That's nuts. If you think astrocartography is fully formed and ready to go, no, it's not. It's definitely not. And there's a lot to learn about astrology, Western or Vedic, and there's a lot to learn about locational astrology. And that has been, I guess, my life's work at this point. That's the thing I've done more than anything else. And I'm very happy to share that. And I'm getting into this phase of life now where I'm sharing it more and more. So thank you for having me. Um, so let's talk about Ceres. And Ceres, I decided to put her under the category of compassion. So I did talk about Ceres quite a bit. So just a little bit more. So compassion is one of my guiding principles in holistic astrology, because if there's no compassion, then what are we doing, right? I'm kind of a Buddhist. I mean, I believe in, compassion for all beings. And if that does not guide your astrology, you are screwed. You're effed, because there's so much to see in astrology. We interact with people, and some people share their whole life story with us. And if that life story auto evokes some compassion, because everybody's been hurt, it's just a really essential part. Now, Ceres, I decided to go ahead and put her into this category for today, just because she is actually a positive influence for the most part. Now, let me tell you real quick with Ceres. I take issue with a lot of the modern Western astrological community in the sense that when they have generally focused on Ceres, they focus on the negative aspect of her, and it's completely missing the point of what Ceres actually is, what she actually is. Ceres is this incredibly generous energy. She's feminine, she's earthy. She is, a lot of times, man, I think Ceres might be better to hang out with than Jupiter, because Ceres does a lot of nice things. And I am continually shocked at how good Ceres influences are for people in locational astrology. They are among the absolute best things you can find for people when you get good Ceres influences. And let me honor a very brilliant teacher and guy who was my brother in a way, and one of my best friends. This is Kelly Lee Phipps. This is his website, Divine Inspirational Astrology. He passed away years ago on March 25th, 2014. So he actually passed away. Geez, that's insane. That's 8 years ago. You can't. Okay, I can't believe he died 8 years ago. Anyway, he was an incredible astrologer. Now, his website is being hacked. You see, it says local sex writings. That's not him. He's not alive. So his mom occasionally has to go in here and try to fix his website. He was a really, really brilliant astrologer for a lot of reasons. I got to write a tribute to him in the Mountain Astrologer when he passed. One of the things that was amazing about him is if you got a reading from that guy, you felt really good about yourself every time. Like, he was so inspired by the cool things in your chart and to tell you how cool that was. And he had this really, truly childlike enthusiasm that, I wish I could put that in the bottle and drink it, and so he was really well loved for the inspiration he was to people. And here I'll show you briefly his tropical chart, which is just all kinds of Sagittarius. Neptune, Jupiter, Mars, Sag rising, Venus in Sag, last degree of Sag. So anyway, he was like nothing else. Now, where his work has not been appreciated, and where I'm hoping to make his work appreciated, is he wrote this book, Celestial Renaissance. I was looking for it, I couldn't find it. If I had it, I'd hand it up right now, I'll show it to you. It's around here somewhere. Celestial Renaissance. And he actually made the case, which I am now, I agree with him. It took me years and years and years and years. It took me decades to get to this point where he basically advocated a modern system where Chiron rules Virgo, Ceres rules Taurus, and of course Uranus rules Aquarius, and Pluto rules Scorpio, and Neptune rules Pisces. And that's a modern approach that's actually elegant and balanced. One body per sign. I've been testing this for a very long time. It's absolutely great. And Ceres, Kelly did such an amazing thing for me, because he focused in his book on Ceres about being about abundance, about being about fullness, about being all these wonderful things. And the thing I was starting to criticize a minute ago was the Western astrological tradition has taken Ceres and generally focused on the sad part of her story, which isn't very meaty mythology, right? Pluto, Hades, like the god of the underworld, rapes or takes Persephone from Ceres, from Demeter, takes her to the underworld for half the year. And so Ceres is depressed because her daughter has been taken away for half the year. So this is a key part of Ceres' story, okay? But Western astrologers have focused on that as if that is what Ceres is about. Like, she's about grief and loss. No, she is about grief and loss only in the sense that that's what her kind of negative manifestation is. That's what her problematic manifestation is. Just like Jupiter's manifestation might be like overconfidence, right? If it's problematic, in the sense of entitlement, you go on and on, right? Venus, you're too, maybe, a little too soft, maybe you're not, not working hard enough or something like that, So everything has a downside. And the downside of Ceres is actually these stories around grief and loss or separation involving children. Of course, that happens all the time. People get divorced, they got their kids half the time and stuff like that. So it is true that Ceres will be connected with some of these stories. It is, however, fundamentally a benefic. And I know benefic, malefic is not language that everyone likes in modern astrology, but in other words, it's more like Jupiter, and Venus than it is like Mars and Saturn. It is fundamentally kind, benevolent, and when it comes and visits your chart, nice stuff happens that your ego likes, right? That's a benefic. When the benefic comes to your chart, as long as it's reasonably well placed for you, stuff happens that your ego likes. Hey, I got money. Hey, I got friends. Hey, I got whatever it is, right? The malefics more often are giving you stuff you don't like. Your ego doesn't like it. Oh my God, I'm challenged, right? Oh my God, I'm in pain. Well, that's no fun, right? These things happen, and we say that. Well, Ceres will act like a benefic. She will act like a benefic. She's huge, 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 huge benefic, and she is the most incredibly undiscovered, wonderful, important thing in astrology today. Because what happened in astrology, let's go to the modern astrology in the West. We brought Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto into the system, basically. We added three male gods who are all transpersonal and intense as hell, right? Uranus actually is quite positive for a lot of things. It's not necessarily intense. And any of these things can be good for something. But we took a system that was balanced. Sun and moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Maybe add the nodes if you're Vedic, right? That's a balanced system. It's elegant. And therefore, because it's balanced, it can do a good job of reflecting our reality. But then we added all this intense stuff to it. And what I was starting to say earlier is why did Placidus come around? Because we needed some psychological astrology, because psychology was what was going on. So therefore, astrology adapted to become psychological. These Placidus houses and so on. So astrology is this ever-adapting language that we, co-arise with, and it interacts with us. Why do we have locational astrology now? I don't know. I mean, people can move around the world a whole lot more than they could, 200 years ago, right? So, 200 years ago, where do you want to move? Where do you want to go on vacation? I don't know. If you're rich, that was relevant, I guess, but it's a lot more relevant now, And Jim Lewis was American. He came up with a very American kind of astrology. Where do I live? We have a huge country. We have 50 states, right? So we have a big enough country. We can go all over the place and get different parents, a different local space, and different astrocartography lines, and different influences from the relocated astrology or geodetics if you're into that. So this is a modern kind of astrology. And it's evolved to meet a modern need. So astrology, I think, it just keeps evolving and kind of trying to work with us, So Ceres we're talking about. So here's the thing with Ceres. Okay, if you see her, there are certain places for Ceres where she'll tend to give more difficult results. So Ceres, I'm pretty convinced her rulership is Taurus. Therefore, her detriment is Scorpio, and that's true. You could use that as tropical or sidereal. Her exaltation seems to be Cancer. You might have thought it might be Virgo. It just seems to be Cancer. It really, Chiron and Virgo, Chiron and Virgo is another story. That's actually more like rulership for Chiron. But Ceres and Virgo is a fine placement. She's fine in the earth signs, except Capricorn, because she does kind of follow the moon in terms of dignity. She's also a mother, so it's not too surprising, but it's reversed. So she rules Taurus, but exalts in Cancer, and the moon rules Cancer and exalts in Taurus. So I'm pretty well convinced of that. I've seen that plenty of times. So for example, the other day I had a client, he had Ceres, 25 degrees of Cancer. I wish I had the chart in front, I could show it to you. It's 25 Cancer tropical astrology in the 9th house. That is an amazing Ceres placement. Why? It's exalted Cancer. It's in the 9th house. It's also in Cancer in sidereal astrology, because 25 minus about 24 is going to take you to there. And it's also what I call a triple. It's a triple placement, which means that placement, if you have a placement at 25 Cancer, because I have this with Saturn, I have Saturn 25 Cancer. Donald Trump has Saturn, I think, at 25 or give or take a degree Cancer too. What happens is that becomes a triple placement. It becomes Cancer in the tropical chart, sidereal chart, and the Navamsha chart, which is the 9th harmonic in Vedic astrology. So that person had a triply exalted Ceres. Ceres in Cancer, Ceres in Cancer, Ceres in Cancer. Those are the three main charts I look at, the Western, the Vedic, and the Navamsha. So Ceres exalted every which way in the 9th house. And I got the impression this guy does very, very well. He lived in a foreign country. I did not get the impression that they were particularly, short on money, and he seemed to actually come from a really nice family. So that's such a nice symbol. If you see a symbol like that, Ceres at 25 Cancer in the ninth house, that person's going to have a really blessed life. They're going to have a lot of benefic energy in their life. Again, the Earth Mother is exalted. The Earth Mother already wants to give you good stuff, nice stuff, wants to feed you and take care of you. Put her in Cancer in the ninth house, you know. So that was a really amazing placement. I want to show you Kelly's chart because his chart, I think, is fascinating. What does he have? Ceres in Taurus. Now, the guy who I give credit for being the Ceres guy is my old friend Kelly. And I'm continuing his work. Like what I did is I tested his theory and found it was absolutely true. It's so true. And so I want to give him credit for really focusing on Ceres, and I've tested it and proven it's true to my satisfaction. So where's Kelly have Ceres? In the fifth house. We were just talking about Stephen Forrest having that fifth house moon, right? So does Kelly have this good past life karma, the Purva Punya, something positive, something creative, something wonderful around Ceres and Taurus? Yeah. He wrote a book called Celestial Renaissance, and he says Ceres rules Taurus, and she's wonderful. She's fantastic. Stop saying she's all about grief and loss. You know, he didn't say that, but I'm saying that. She is sometimes about grief and loss, but more so when she is in Scorpio, for example, or Capricorn. You know, Capricorn is probably, it seems to be a particularly tough placement for her, actually, because the fall is more significant than detriment. It's harder. So if you see Ceres in a chart in Scorpio or Capricorn, just know that it's going to be more, it may be more of that difficult, you know, grief, loss kind of Ceres story. However, if she is in Taurus or Cancer, where I believe she has dignity, but she is retrograde, that can give some of the qualities of the opposite, which can make it more difficult. But on the flip side, if she's in Capricorn or Scorpio, but retrograde, then it becomes even better, actually, because now it can give you some of the qualities of the opposite sign. So the most difficult placements to be careful with the Ceres would be just Scorpio, not retrograde, Capricorn, not retrograde, and potentially Taurus retrograde or Cancer retrograde, but that becomes like kind of like exceptionally good and kind of challenging at the same time. It's more of a really mixed bag when it's like that. So anyway, Kelly, here he is, right? Now, Kelly, by the way, this moon, it looks like it's in Gemini, and it is in tropical, but where is it in sidereal? It's in Taurus, of course, right? Just subtract, you know, about 24 degrees and you get to Taurus. So Kelly also had an exalted moon that was angular. So the guy who's bringing this Earth Mother energy to astrologers had a very angular exalted moon. And this Ceres right at that fifth house cusp in Taurus, I think it's interesting when you look at Neptune and Jupiter. They're 150, but they're in the eighth house position to Ceres. So if you were to put Ceres on the ascendant of this chart, you would see Jupiter and Neptune conjunct the eighth house cusp, which is occult stuff like astrology. So literally Jupiter, Neptune, and Saturn, like here's this great, big, incredible, abundant thing he gave us. And I tested it. He's right. And when you do locational astrology and you get good lines for Ceres, you know, you can get some tough ones too, but if you get good lines for Ceres, those are generally the happiest places people will be. Nobody knows it. But that's why I'm saying it, because it's time for people to know it. So anyway, have we covered all the basic principles here? We covered compassion, flexibility, curiosity, precision, humility. The last one is passion. And I'm probably running out of time, so we may start to run out a little bit. By the way, I had Jeffrey Wolf's
You're good.
Okay, I had Jeffrey Wolf's green chart here. He doesn't necessarily like people reading his chart. It's also very public, so it's kind of like, so I didn't want to focus on his chart, you know, out of respect. But let me just show you something that's cool in his chart. And this is one actually he and I have the same in a way. So his ascendant, I'm not even going to pull up his chart too much, but his ascendant is 1611. My ascendant is 1638 Scorpio. So we have the same actual degree rising, which is the 17th degree of Scorpio. And the thing about this that's cool is, let's pretend this was a Vedic chart. Let's pretend this was a Vedic chart. And we get the Navamsha chart, the ninth harmonic. What happens is, if a planet, if at any point is at the middle of a fixed sign, it will end up being in the same sign in the Navamsha chart, and it's called Vargotama. So very often I find that there are things you can apply to tropical from Vedic or to sidereal from Western. It's almost like this interchangeable thing a little bit. Well, I think it is actually in a lot of cases, totally interchangeable. Different, but interchangeable, where you can use either one. And so if you do my chart or Jeff's chart, assuming it's like a Vedic chart, use the tropical. And by the way, there are people who just do tropical Jyotish. There are people who just don't even do sidereal. They just read the tropical from a Jyotish point of view. So from that point of view, my ascendant and Jeff Green's ascendant Jeffrey Wolfgren's ascendant, are both double Scorpio. They are Vargotama. They are Scorpio both ways. So he should be very Scorpio. I should be very Scorpio, according to that. You know, my chart, Mercury's in Leo basically at the top of the chart. Remember where Stephen Forrest had Ceres in Leo at the top of the chart, 90 degrees behind his ascendant? I have the same exact thing, but it's Mercury. And so Mercury's in the middle of Leo in tropical astrology, which is one of those kind of like, middle of the fixed sign. It's like a double thing. It becomes more powerful. It becomes more useful. So any of those things, middle Scorpio, middle Taurus, middle Aquarius, all those things, you're going to get a stronger emphasis and kind of better results for the most part. But it's also going to become very, very much typical of that thing. So my chart, like if we apply that same rule to my chart, this is one of the key things. Mercury is at that equal house cusp. It's 16 degrees. That's the cusp right there. And so Mercury in Leo is very, 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 essential to my chart in the middle of that chart, right? So, for example, Mercury in Leo, I was the first president of this Association for Young Astrologers. Does that sound like Mercury in Leo? Mercury, young. Leo is kind of youthful too, but leadership, right? So that's a thing, right? So that's a real thing. Like that's just one person got to kind of initially do that, and it happened to be me. And it's because you get stuff like this. If I didn't have stuff like this, it wouldn't have been me. But this is an example of just using your head and saying, hey, you know what? I've got a tropical chart over here, and 16 Scorpios rising. Now you can pull up a Navamsha chart or a ninth harmonic chart for an individual. I don't do this a lot in tropical, but I'm starting to play with it more because I think to be consistent, I kind of need to actually. I think the ninth harmonic is extremely important. For those of you who don't know that, if you aren't familiar with Vedic astrology, the Navamsha, the ninth harmonic, is such an amazing chart. And it's really the second, it's like a second opinion on your whole life. You could say it's your soul. You could say it's who you're becoming. You could say it has to do with topics of marriage. Some people think it's like your next life because it's like the soul's becoming that. So here is a ninth harmonic tropical chart for me. And what I wanted to point out was just that the rising is still Scorpio, right? It was tropical Scorpio. The first way is tropical Scorpio this way. And now, arguably, this chart should be a chart of my soul. If it's true, the way it is in sidereal, this chart should tell you things about me. I'll just briefly tell you something I find really funny. I have Sun and Leo in the ninth and Moon in Cancer in the eighth in my main, and then it's reversed here. It's Moon in Leo and Sun in Cancer. So it's either mutual reception, Sun and Moon 8-9, or it's well, it depends on if you're doing whole signs or not too. But anyway, sometimes you see similar things. That's always fun to see those things. Anytime you see similar things, ask yourself, why do I keep seeing this thing? Like if you're reading my chart, why did I see Sun Leo, Moon Cancer, Moon Leo, Sun Cancer up near the top of the chart? Like that should mean something. That's all I'm saying. And so this is an example of a placement like that. So the placements, by the way, that you can kind of play with that are fun. The triple placements, the one that's most typical is going to be around like 24 to 27 in tropical. And what's going to happen is that will be, or if you're Vedic, if you have a planet that's like, let me show you my Vedic chart. I have this. If you have a cardinal planet, that's Vargotama. So cardinal planet in a cardinal sign, that is Vargotama. You know what that means. I'm talking about Vedic. So this happens, for example, with my Saturn and my Jupiter, because when you're at the beginning of a cardinal sign, you end up in the same sign in the Navamsha. So my Jupiter is Vargotama. It's in Aries in both of my charts if you do Vedic. Saturn is in Cancer in both of my charts if you do Vedic. But in my Western, it's also in Cancer and in Aries. So these are my triples. I have a triple Saturn and Cancer in the ninth house. I have a triple Jupiter and Aries, more or less in the sixth house. It's in the seventh house of my Vedic chart. But so, and the reason again is because it's the same sign, tropical astrology, sidereal astrology, and Navamsha. Now, if you could pick a Western astrologer and a Vedic astrologer, both of them will tell you that those things are significant. It just happens that the Venn diagram just happens to be overlapping here, and I'm encouraging us to look at that. Just go, oh, that's kind of neat. Where do things overlap? Where is there commonality between things? And I honestly feel that because of all this that I do, I have much more X-ray vision into a chart, and I have much more broad vision as well. I can go deeper because of what I've learned in terms of precision. I can go broader because of what I've learned in terms of like using multiple systems. And I love my work, and my clients are really digging my work. I've been doing it 28 years. So, it takes a while to get really, really good at something, hopefully, but I'm very comfortable with this now because I've seen things enough to where I can start to say, these things, they overlap a bit. So one way to get a triple placement is in cardinal. or just like my, Donald Trump too. He's got a triple Saturn in Cancer. Donald Trump does. If you do the same sort of thing. And so I could say some things about him. I probably shouldn't. Now, here's where you get a special kind of thing in mutable. In mutable, it's basically the way to get a triple kind of thing is at the very end. So the 29-degree mutables are very interesting. 29, I've looked at 29 Sag people in my life. My mom's 29 Sag rising. And these people are like very angelic. Like they're very, 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 very Sagittarius and very positive. And one reason is because the right, well, first of all, it's double Sag. Let's say 29 Sag. It's double Sag because it's Western and Vedic, tropical, sidereal. So just right off the bat, it's the same sign in both systems, which is very, very powerful. But if we do this principle with this ninth harmonic, you will find that if you have something like 28, 29 of a mutable, it ends up also in the same sign in the ninth harmonic. So if you were doing a Vedic chart, you would say it's Vargotama. Like in Vedic astrology, if you have a planet at 28 Gemini, it will be Vargotama. It will be in Gemini in the main or Rashi chart and the Navamsa chart. So those placements at the last 3 degrees and 20 minutes of a mutable sign in tropical astrology, those are triple placements. If it's 29, it's like quadruple because that last degree is also extra emphasis. So if you see anything like late mutable in a tropical chart, you can be really, really, really confident that symbol is very descriptive of that. It may be the absolute key to that person's life. It may be the most obvious thing in that person's life. And then the way you get it in fixed is a bit weird because you can't get Vargotama and double. No, you can't get like if like my Mercury's in the middle of Leo, so it's like Vargotama. It's like kind of double Leo in that respect, but it's not double Leos. In other words, it's not Leo in the sidereal. You can't get it. I can't get like a sidereal, Mercury and Leo, and have it at the middle of Leo and tropical. Just at this time in history, you can't get it. So what you have to do with fixed to get those really emphasized placements are the middle of the fixed signs, right? Which correspond to all those, those pagan holidays that happen in the middle of, the fixed months or whatever, right? And so the middle of a fixed sign is a real power point. It's a real emphasis point, and it can really help clue you into the parts of a chart that are most emphasized and maybe most potent, most powerful, most useful. Because generally Vargotama is a strength, and I think it's generally a strength because the planet is in the same place. It's like it's not having to move. It's like, no, I'm here. I'm in this place. So, you go to my Jupiter, it's Aries, Aries, Aries. I'm not afraid to go after a lot of things in life. You know what I mean? I have a Jupiter in Aries. That's one of my assets. I will speak to things that other people won't speak to because I believe in this or that thing. That's my personality. So, and I actually had to step back and looked at myself at one point, like maybe a year or two ago, and I realized the whole thing with the triple Saturn and the triple Jupiter. It's so much about locational astrology. Saturn in Cancer is a symbol of real estate and home. Like, can I get the home I want? Jupiter in Aries is, can I be like an innovative teacher? Can I pioneer something new or something like that? That's what I do. I'm trying to literally pioneer a whole new approach to certainly locational astrology, right? And so you could absolutely understand the essence of this chart, give you mine, right? By thinking about that triple Saturn and triple Jupiter, triple Cancer Saturn, triple Jupiter, triple Aries Jupiter, I mean to say. So there's a lot of neat things like that. Jeff Wolf Green is one of these, emphasized Scorpio types, right? Let's see. Does Stephen have any of these handy? Let's see. Oh, that moon is so close. It is so close. Like it's literally 1 minute away. If I take 1 minute off his moon, or 2 minutes, like we would have a kind of an emphasized moon because it would be like Vargotama, essentially at the beginning of a cardinal signs. That would get some emphasis actually. So nothing else just jumping out at this one other than Uranus. Perfect. Because I wanted to mention this in his chart earlier. Why do I think Uranus is so significant? Well, the first reason is it's within 1 degree of his 8th house cusp. 8th house cusp is 2846, and there's Uranus. It's within 1 degree. So another key to understanding who Stephen Forrest is should be very, very, very Uranus 8th house, but not just Uranus 8th house. Why is it not just? It's one of these triples. It's at the end of mutable. So his Uranus is in Gemini in Western, tropical. It's in Gemini in Vedic, sidereal. And if you bring up his 9th harmonic chart, you will also find Uranus in Gemini. So this is very arguably a triple Gemini position. Now we're getting emphasis. Now we know, wait a minute,
okay, well, what could this guy do with that? Now, I think Uranus going through the eighth house. I tell people, hey, can you study astrology for a while? Because that's a great way to spend Uranus transiting through your eighth house. Study astrology if you can when you get that one. Because Uranus is connected to connecting all the stars, the dots in the sky to form this great big picture. Now that's Uranus. It's the sky god. So Uranus does connect everything. That's why sometimes like this new era we're in with all this Aquarian emphasis, there's a lot of conspiracy thinking because people are trying to connect all the dots, and sometimes they do it wisely, and sometimes they're just crazy. But Uranus and Gemini, so we have this Uranus trying to connect all the dots in a triple Gemini position, very, very, very Gemini. So if let's say if he were an astrologer, he would be very, very Gemini. Maybe he'd travel a lot. Maybe he'd write a lot. Maybe he'd have a lot to say, right? So this is key, right? And then you add that to the moon and the Ceres, and we're like, wait a minute, this is exactly what Stephen Forrest is, right? But now we're doing something where you could use tropical, but use precise degrees and understand what you're doing and say this Ceres is like a double Leo placement. This Uranus is a triple Gemini placement. This moon is very close to a double Aries, but it's not quite that. If it was 319 or 320, I think it would actually be there. So it's so close. But that, anyway. So yeah, so there we go. There we go. A triple, he has a triple Gemini Uranus. That's how I would say that. And I would say it is extraordinarily eighth house. So could this guy be really brilliant at writing about astrology, at bringing new awareness to this whole realm of so many deep and mysterious things that we look at in the eighth house, Yeah, actually, so cool. It's a great example. So I love what I love about astrology is once you really start to know what you're doing with it, you can pull up anybody's chart and just see so many things, right? You see why is this person like that? I love just pulling up recently the Tinder swindler. If you saw that on Netflix, right? This guy swindled women out of tens of millions of dollars. He would hook up with them on Tinder and just manage a bunch of women at the same time and just keep get to the point where he could ask them for money. And he's still getting away with it. Like he's gotten away with it. He's still in Israel right now. And he's ripped off a ton of women and he's just kind of doing his own thing. But I pulled his chart up and say, why does this guy look like this? And it's so cool to see, oh, there he is. You know what his chart looks like actually? I want to go into my files to pull it up. I'm afraid I'll show someone else's data or something. But let me just tell you, if you can imagine it, it's very simple. His chart, and I wrote about it a little bit. He has Mercury at the middle of Virgo, 15 Virgo. Why is that significant? The middle of Virgo is the exaltation degree of Mercury. So if you have anything at the middle of Virgo, those planets act a lot like very mercurial. Like the people who are really voracious students, they will have planets very often at the middle of Virgo. So anyway, he had Mercury at the middle of Virgo. Now, Mercury can be, a criminal, right? Mercury is not necessarily ethical at all. Mercury's not about ethics, actually. And in Virgo, it's a very practical sign. It's very pragmatic, right? And it's the exaltation of Mercury. This is tropical astrology, by the way. It wasn't true in sidereal. So he has this incredibly sharp Mercury as this kind of criminal mastermind where he can communicate with a bunch of women simultaneously and get $10 million from them. Now, what was interesting about his chart was what was conjunct his Mercury in Virgo at the middle of his chart? Ceres. Ceres is like 1 or 2 degrees away from his Mercury. So Ceres is the abundance. Mercury is the thief. He stole, and Ceres is also women. He stole tens of millions of dollars from women, right? That he met on Twitter, right? Mercury. So you can pull up anybody's chart and see, oh, that's the reflection of the Tinder swindler, And so, I knew I'd pull up Stephen's chart and find some cool stuff I had never seen before. And I could do the same thing with Jeff's chart too. And a few charts I had Jim Lewis here because I actually think his chart is a great example of where the sidereal does really work a lot better for me. This is his tropical chart. It's a porphyry house system. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see such there are some cool things here, obviously, but I don't see so much in this chart that I would have probably guessed that this would be a chart of someone like Jim Lewis. Jim Lewis created astrocartography. It's a trademark term and all that. And I looked at this in my locational class and I showed him that, this was actually one where the sidereal was really good. Let me actually bring in a circular chart so you guys can see it. This chart made so much more sense to me. It looks like Jim Lewis to me in a way that's, again, a sidereal. It should be objectively true. Why? Saturn is in Aries in the 10th house. Mars is in Aquarius in the 8th house. But let's pretend for a minute it's tropical. I'm just pretend it's tropical. Seriously, it's okay. It won't hurt you. What we have here is a mutual reception between Saturn and Mars, where the 10th house is the sky. So astronomy, if you have someone who's an astronomer, they might have a really 10th house chart. Even an astrologer, you'll see 10th house there because it is the sky. It is what is above you, right? So he was actually particularly good at astronomy, Saturn and Aries. Now, Saturn is the fall for Saturn. It's not a strong place for Saturn. Here's one of my main sort of teachings about this. When a planet is in its fall, and this is also true of detriment, it's really true of fall. A planet in its fall is challenged. I have Venus in Virgo. It's a challenge, okay? But the sign is the strength. The sign is a massive strength. It's like a superpower. In fact, it's something I've often worked with the clients, like you have this superpower, and therefore you have these challenges that you have to have in your life because of the superpower. So for example, Saturn and Aries people have Aries superpowers. They're very independent. They're very bold. They're very courageous. They will go out on their own and do their own thing. They will have this, all the good things you could say about Aries, pretty much, you can say about people with Saturn Aries, but it's not the planet. It is the sign. Because what happens is the planet becomes weaker, and then the sign is kind of like siphoning the strength. So with Saturn and Aries, the strength moves from Saturn to Aries, from the principle of Saturn to the principle of Aries. So they're not as good at Saturn stuff often. Like a typical, and he's not maybe the best example of this, but a typical Saturn Aries person is not that good at working with other people because they like to do their own thing quick. They don't want to hear what anyone else has to say. They just want to go. So so the ancient Vedic texts say, if you have Saturn Aries, you can kind of act like a fool because you won't listen to people. That's the thing. Saturn Aries people, they're so independent, they're so headstrong, right? They'll do their own thing. And that's part of having a weak Saturn. Because when you have a strong Saturn, you work with people, you work with reality, you understand reality, and you're kind of like conforming to it. Saturn Aries is not good at conforming because they don't have a strong Saturn. And if you don't have a strong Saturn, how are you supposed to conform? So generally speaking, Saturn Aries people, they won't do that. They will have weaker Saturns. Maybe they're kind of these intense people. They don't like think of the opposite example, Saturn and Libra. That's the opposite. That's an exalted Saturn. I think of Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake, especially, back in the day for Britney. Saturn in Libra, it's kind of, it's poppy, it's cute, it's smiley, it's nice. It's not trying to challenge anybody. Saturn in Libra doesn't want to challenge anybody usually. I mean, unless you have a different kind of Saturn in Libra. Saturn in Libra in general is, hey, I want to get along with everybody. And I want to be kind of attractive and nice and smart and easy to work with. And that's, therefore, I'm going to get ahead in life. I'm going to keep punching the clock. I'm going to get my pension and have my nice partner maybe. And, so Saturn in Libra can kind of work with reality. It works with government, it works with a lot of things. Saturn in Aries, the strength of it is it doesn't work with reality as it is. It's like, no, this is how it should be. And so the woman who started the Red Cross had Saturn in Aries because she said, no, this is how it should be. I don't care what it is today. I'm doing this, So anyway, Jim Lewis, quite a pioneer, right? Quite a pioneer. So again, it's the Aries that makes him this pioneer. Saturn in Aries. Now it's a mutual reception with Mars. So there's also this further strengthening of the principle. Saturn is nowhere near as sort of weakened, I would say, because Mars is in Aquarius and that's traditionally ruled by Saturn. So this is a traditional mutual reception. But the 8th house is basically astrology. The 9th house, the 10th house in this case, we'll call it astronomy. And it's Saturn and Mars. And why are Saturn and Mars significant for Jim Lewis? He was into the science and the details, and he figured out a way to map the planets on a map in Mundo, which is more astronomically accurate in terms of was it actually rising or setting or not. So very mathematical, very scientific, very practical, and a lot of technology. He created the technology. He created the maps. And then he innovated it. He promoted it. He was this person. So when I see this chart, and we kind of riff on this for a while, this is like, oh, that was Jim Lewis. But again, it's sidereal, so that's objectively Jim Lewis. I didn't know Jim Lewis. I never met him. I never met him. So if I had known Jim Lewis, this is his tropical chart, I would know him this way. I would feel him this way. I would have experienced his Libra moon and his Leo rising and his Gemini sun and all this business, his Mars and Pisces. I would have felt that from him, right? But I didn't. So I can look at his life objectively at a distance, and that's sidereal, and that's basically whole signs. And I can see exactly, the key themes of who he actually was. So that's another chart I had here that I had that we could kind of play with for some example stuff. Now, do we have time for me to say one other thing, or what do you think? Should I end?
Well, we're getting close to 90. Okay. Well, we are at about 90 minutes, but yeah, one more thing. And we have one question, if you want to take that.
Yeah, we take the question then. Let me see.
Okay.
The chat here.
So Well, actually, there was a comment
Hey.
from Blake, and if he wants to unmute and make that comment, he can do that.
Yeah, so he says, I've lived with a couple or a few things, midpoints with Ceres or parens, Ceres Chiron, Ceres Hygeia, Ceres Node, Ceres Chronos. And that is it's Uranian, right, with Uranus and Hygeia. So I know nothing about that, basically, so I can't really speak to that. Would a Ceres line for someone with Ceres in Capricorn be considered inauspicious? Tropical Capricorn, but sidereal Sag? It might. It's more complicated. Basically, it's kind of like Jupiter and Capricorn. It's actually the same thing, because I think it is the fall for both of them. Jupiter is definitely just fall in Capricorn. So it's kind of like, would you go to a Jupiter and Capricorn line? Well, in that case, let's say it was tropical Capricorn, sidereal Sag. Well, that gets a lot better because it's sidereal Sag. That's a lot better for Jupiter in general. But yeah, but would you kind of do that? And so the thing is, Jupiter is a positive influence. Ceres is a positive influence. Ceres will give you lots of yummy stuff. You go to a Ceres line, even if she's in Capricorn, she'll give you a lot of yummy stuff. Like, she'll give you some positive results that are quite noticeable. But in Capricorn, I would be a lot more cautious. Like, I wouldn't be as quick to recommend it. Then I would look at aspects. I would look at is it retrograde? Now, if Ceres is retrograde in Capricorn, I like it more. I definitely like it more, because the retrograde will reverse the energy in some ways, and that's like Cancer, which is like exaltation. But definitely the aspects would be very important. What about the placement for Ceres? What when you have Ceres in Capricorn, but it's smack dab on your 5th house cusp, right? Like Stephen Forrest's moon was, or like Stephen Forrest. What if it's smack dab on your 10th house cusp in the equal house system? Well, now we're getting more of a clue. Well, your Ceres is good for career. With Stephen Forrest, his Ceres is good for career and teaching. Maybe you got Ceres in Capricorn. Maybe it's, I don't know, on the 2nd house cusp. Well, that's actually not an easy example. I shouldn't say that one. The reason it's not easy because the 2nd house is complicated, and so it's like that could be tough for family. For example, Ceres in Capricorn, the 2nd house is not necessarily a happy family. That might not be that really. So, but let's say it was at the 5th house cusp or the 9th house cusp. Those are very positive, very safe places in the chart. Then I'm a lot more inclined to recommend that Ceres in Capricorn, because the chart has shown me from the natal chart, actually this Ceres is a lot better than you were thinking, even though it was in a sign that doesn't give it good results as much. And anytime a planet is in a sign where it doesn't give the best results, the sign will get better results. So if you have Mars in Libra, Mars is in its detriment. It's not as challenging as Mars in Cancer, which is more challenging, which is Mars in its fall. But you get a little challenge with Mars in Libra, but then you get really good Libra qualities. You get really good Libra assets. A better example maybe is Mars in Cancer, where you'll definitely have a challenge with Mars, if Mars in Cancer typically, but Cancer becomes the strength. So Mars and Cancer people are often very sweet, very nurturing. They take care of people. They're just wonderful like that. But they struggle to deal with Mars. So they struggle to deal with pain and aggression and power and conflicts and separations. Mars gets intense for them, right? They don't handle it well because Mars is in its fall in Cancer. That's the way it is. So Ceres is in the middle of the 5th house in the natal chart. Okay, yeah, I would look at the ascending degree. If it was at the same degree as the ascendant, that makes it a lot better. If it's porphyry and it's just kind of in the middle, then that's interesting. I would be then curious, is it in the 6th house if you do whole sign houses? Is it in a sign that is trine to the ascendant sign? That's probably better, unless we're working with a 6th house topic. Generally speaking, that 5th house is going to give you a lot more of the results that you're looking for as a human being with an ego. We all are. And so we're looking for happy stuff for the most part. I do get clients sometimes that actually just want moksha. They just want liberation. And that's kind of interesting because you get to recommend totally different places to them than other people. So Ceres in the middle of the 5th house, that's a good indication. It's in a positive house. That line is therefore connected with some better things. I would look at aspects, obviously. I would look at the placement of Saturn in that chart, because Saturn is the dispositor of Capricorn. So you kind of do all your tricks, right? Maybe there's a fixed star there. You kind of use your things. You look at your essential dignities. Where is it? Maybe it's in the bounds of Jupiter. Well, that seems pretty good, or something like that. So yeah, we got to get into the analysis, right? And that's the thing with really locational astrology. Why a lot of times when people just can't do good enough work with it, because they can't differentiate these things well enough. They can't differentiate this series from that series well enough, and so they're going to make generalizations. Like that's why you go to a forum online on Facebook for astrocartography, and people are constantly asking the wrong question. They're constantly asking like, is a Venus line good? Should I go to my Venus line and stuff like that? And that's the most useless question ever. Like, because no one can tell you that. I can tell you some things about Venus, and yes, Venus things will happen on a Venus line, but that's not specific to you. That's not specific to your story and your chart and your moment in time. So Ceres is trying to Virgo Mars in the middle of the first. Yeah, so okay. So your Ceres has, more ability to work, more ability to create, more ability to, we're talking about Virgo and Capricorn. I mean, and Capricorn is important because if Ceres is in her fall in Capricorn, then the sign has to be the strength. So people with Jupiter in Capricorn, for example, they very often have really good careers. They're very focused on the material side of life because their Jupiter's weak, but their Capricorn is strong. Here, Ceres is in Capricorn. Well, Ceres is weaker, but Capricorn is stronger. So the themes of Capricorn are stronger in this chart. In the fifth, well, then we're thinking this person's going to be successful, and trying to Mars in Virgo, well, definitely then you're definitely going to have plenty of success. You're going to have plenty of ability to work and focus and be detailed and get these things right. Now, I haven't seen the whole chart, so I'm generalizing from a little bit, but we're getting a better and better picture here for this series. But yeah, I would look for hard aspects, including quincunxes as well, squares, oppositions. So back to Blake. Sorry, that's now, did you? I don't know. Did you want to share some of that, Blake, like what had happened there? I think for my purpose for today, I mean no disrespect, but I think I don't want to focus on the the Uranians for today. Ceres Chiron, I do use very much. They're both a part of my approach. So I would be super curious to hear what you would have to say about Ceres Chiron in particular, and maybe afterward, or another time, these other guys. But if you have any comments, feel free to drop them here, or perhaps unmute and make comments. And I'm not sure what you meant to say in terms of you lived with a couple or a few things with midpoints with Ceres or parents. So I guess I would have to ask what kind of Ceres Chiron it was. Was it a parent of Ceres Chiron? That could be the case.
It was local space. I was invented. Well, I don't know if I invented it or not, but
nice.
Just local space aspects, which are very difficult to get to with the software. The software is not helping you.
Well, now just to show real quick what he's talking about. What is local space? Let's do Stephen's chart here. Actually, I'm going to use mine because I can do a good example on mine. And this may or may not be what you're talking about in terms of midpoints. But one of the things I have wondered, and I think it is probably true, I'd like to talk to Michael Erlewine about this because he's the guy that really, Jim Lewis and Michael Erlewine were really the guys that came up with some of these really powerful concepts. And Michael Erlewine was local space. So something I found interesting with local space, if you look at mine, so I live here in Prescott Valley, Arizona, and there is no local space line there. But you know what it is? Look at it. You see how these local space lines are here? So what is it, first of all? Local space is all coming out of my birthplace, which is over here in New Jersey. So all local space is every planet, every body we're looking at gets a circle that goes through your birthplace, and it's just turned in the direction where it was, when you were born. So if it was like due east, then the circle would go due east and would just go all the way around the earth in a big circle. Local space is really cool. And there is this kind of midpoint thing I've wondered about for me, because if I look at the midpoint of the blue one, which is the moon, and Ceres, which is this black one here, right in the middle is where I live. So it seems that I'm living at the midpoint of Moon and Ceres, which I would say, if I were my client, I'd say, well, that's probably a really homey, cozy kind of place. And I've lived here since 2002. I never lived anywhere this long. So now I don't know if that's the kind of midpoint you're referring to, Blake, but I just want to throw that in there because that's when I've really, started to really wonder about, and I think it's probably a thing. But yeah, what were you noticing there?
Well, I lived at 4 different places in Victoria, which is about a 3-hour drive for me. So there's some slight variation in the azimuth of my local space of this town.
Okay.
And the 4th place I lived was different from the other 3, which were all near my node Ceres.
Okay.
Which two out of 3 of them fed me too much, basically.
Huh. Right on. This is curiosity. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is like one of the key principles here. This is why I love what you're doing. I love your curiosity. I love that you want to check something out. You want to, how does this work? How does that work? I think we have not near enough curiosity in astrology. We get to a point where, I've been doing this for 20 years or 30 years. And we stop learning,
I haven't stopped learning at all. It's full speed ahead continuously. I'm still learning.
You're my dude. I mean, that's what it's all about, because astrology never ends. It's infinite. It goes on forever, of course, because the universe can always give us a new symbol or a new way to look at a symbol or a different take on it. Astrology evolves, right? It evolves with us. And this is what we need in astrology. We need that curiosity to discover things. It's like, wait a minute, does a Ceres Chiron parent mean anything? Does the midpoint of a Ceres Chiron local space line mean anything? That's what
All of the midpoints mean something. I've been doing Uranian astrology most of the time. I've been doing astrology, so
nice.
midpoints are my thing.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I agree too. I love midpoints. You see them show up, and that's precision too, right? When you have a midpoint and it lines up very precisely, that tells you something's going on. It's really big. So yeah, so this is, you are doing a really good job of showing me the kind of curiosity that I'm all about, and that I encourage in my students. We're always looking for new things. We're trying to discover new things. If you think you know what you're doing, you stopped learning. It's a shame. It's like you might as well just might as well have a funeral for you as an astrologer, because you think you know stuff. You're not learning anymore. You're not trying to figure out something new.
Yeah,
After I write my, go ahead.
That's distressing when I stop learning, but I know it will come again.
Yeah. No, I mean, you learn, at a certain point you get comfortable with what you know, but don't get too comfortable. Don't plateau for too long if you get comfortable. I mean, I've learned a lot of things the last 3 years. I've been studying astrology 29 years and doing readings. I've done thousands of readings for 28 years now. And I love trying to learn something new. And that's part of beginner's mind. It's part of the humility. And it's part of just like, we're not trying to say, oh, I've figured it all out, and I'm not going to learn anymore. It's a journey. We're always learning. We're always discovering. We're always seeing these new reflections of ourselves in the heavens. And, it's just a beautiful thing. So today was an introduction to holistic astrology. It kind of went a few interesting directions. In a week, we've got an introduction to holistic locational astrology. And then the week after that, we're doing free readings in that tradition. So you can actually show up and, we can kind of play with some charts and see how that starts to work. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions that might be here at the end. Otherwise, I know I've borrowed you guys for quite a while, and I really appreciate you being here. So anybody have anything else? Feel free.
It doesn't look like it. I thank you so much, Moses. This has been really fun.
Oh, good.
And looking forward to the next couple of weeks.
All right, very good, very good. Yeah, so same bat time and channel a week from now, and then also 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
great talk, Moses. It was great listening to you.
Well,
I mean, definitely getting the point of view from a tropical, perspective to the Vedic perspective. I mean, it's great, kind of to look at, I mean, it's good to know that you are looking on the, you're looking at both sides of the coins. But again, it's the same coin, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny how much you can do both ways if you just open your mind a little bit and realize that we've got almost like a language. It's almost like I don't know if it's like an operating system, and we can just kind of make a subtle shift to the software and still use the same operating system. Basically, it's still the same 12 houses. I don't think the planets are any different between Western and Vedic. Some people would argue they are. I don't think they are really. The signs don't mean anything very different either. It's the same exact building blocks. The aspects are different. Lots of things are different. But a lot of it is very, very, very much the same. So yeah, thank you for that. And in my class, I enjoy where sometimes I'll kind of say, okay, if you're a Vedic astrologer, look at this or whatever. And if you're a Western astrologer, look at this. So I kind of teach to both at the same time. And it seemed to work, it seemed to work well enough. So yes. So anyway, thank you, Blake. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, this is really nice for you guys to have me on too. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. We appreciate you. Yes.